Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissack and Dana Gentry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Dana Gentry.
Hey, Dana, how are you? Oh, by the way, the Nordstrom's anniversary sale starts tomorrow.
Oh, for the card, we're like right off the bat, like not how was your trip, not tell me about your fish. The most important thing right off the bat, the Nordstrom sale starts.
Well, I hadn't heard you mention it, so I'm like, oh, I better tell her because I know you.
I'm so glad you did because I forgot. Yes. Oh my gosh. And this is the time of year I buy like 15 Barefoot Dreams blankets and I give them.
They have a new color that's so pretty. But the other thing too, I noticed I'm going to be traveling, so I'm not going to be able to go there or anything, which I never am able to go there. But if you find a stylist, she can get on and see your wish list. So just put it all on your wish list and then she can just charge you for it and send them to you.
Oh, that's a great idea. I didn't know that. Oh, great idea. Yes.
Yeah, so now
Amazon Prime is today and tomorrow too. So I already did my Amazon order this morning.
I know I'm not very good at what I need on Amazon for later. You know, I need to figure it out. So I haven't figured Amazon out yet. Barely figured Nordstrom's out. For years, I would be like one of the high ambassador people or something. I'm like, what's the anniversary sale? What do you mean? I never went. I never did anything with it. Finally, Bailey's like, Mom, you've got to take advantage of this.
It's so good. I know. I always wait for Amazon Prime to stock up on like the stuff that I do all the time, like my vitamin C packets and my bone broths and like all that stuff. Because they're like 60% off during some of them are like 50 and some of that stuff like that symbiotic. I've been drinking that. I've been doing those little. I meant to send this to you. The glutathione. Okay, those like remember that vitamin C one I gave you? Well, now they just came out with glutathione in that same thing, and I always get a glutathione push at the end of my IVs, my supplement IVs. But they say taking one of those little things a day is like, apparently glutathione is like all the thing now.
Oh, it is. I do IVs on glutathione all the time.
Yeah. So now they have those packets and you can either put it in your water or just drink it, sip it out of there. Yeah. And they're like $69, I think. And they're on Prime. I don't remember how much, but like almost half, like it was way cheaper. So I stocked up on those today.
Well, I just got that bone broth that you shared with me, but I wound up getting, maybe the Thai one. And then
I haven't tried that.
So I'll try it. I'll let you know. I hope it's good because I need another way to get some more protein in. I just can't eat that much stuff every day to get all the protein.
And I'd be interested to hear what your person says, Linda, because people used to say if you were like 35 plus female and men, I think it's like even younger, but you needed half of your weight in protein, grams of protein per day. Now, when a couple of people that I've been following lately, like even Peter, what's his name?
Peter Attia.
Yeah. Said your exact pounds in protein. So like you weigh 150, you should be having 150 milligrams of or 150 grams of protein a day.
Yeah. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I couldn't get to that. There's no way I could get to that.
Yeah, I Googled something the other day on how to get extra protein in without full meals. And there was a few things, but, I think those little packets of bone broth would be good because they're 10 grams each. So you could do a couple of those and get 20 extra every day. Well,
Ben that doesn't like, go ahead.
But anyway, he said minimum 0.55 to 0.8 of whatever your weight is, unless you're like really trying to build up and then you could do a whole lot more. So I think the more, the better. Yeah. Bottom line.
Yeah. Is it you that doesn't like cottage cheese? I can't remember.
I can eat cottage cheese. I put like sugar-free Jell-O flavor in it or something, make a little thing. It's okay. I just don't like that texture. I don't really like yogurt, stuff like that.
Yeah. I do. I eat that good brand or good or whatever cottage cheese. It has 18 grams of protein in it, that little one. Every single day I eat that for lunch and I put everything but the bagel seasoning in it. And it's
I'm going to be doing that. Yeah. I'm going to add that to my list.
18 grams of protein in those. I get the organic fat free. It's like the light blue lid color.
Yeah.
And that's 18 right there, just in that little thing. And I do like cottage cheese, but with everything in the bagel, it's so good.
Okay. That's what I'm going to try. I'm going to try that next. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we got all the fun stuff out of the way. So we are finishing up the other key important parts for you to either build trust or to trust someone. And this one on is ability. So you want to kick us off? What were your thoughts around ability? I thought this was good because I think sometimes we don't bother. We just assume they have ability to do something we're putting them in the role of, but we don't bother to figure out if they do.
Well, and I did want to say before we start too, I have since reading the book, I'm not 100% finished with the book yet because I'm trying to read like 4 books right now, but I'm over halfway through with it. Since hearing Dr. Henry Cloud, since reading the book, and since really like breaking these down, I'm like noticing this stuff in my life like so much more. It's like freaky. And even just in conversations that I'm having, either with people that work for me or friends or like it's so much of these 5 are so spot on. Like it's so true. If one of them is missing, it really is hard to have like a fully trusting relationship. Yeah. So I'm just so glad. I'm like getting more and more. When I left there, I was like, oh, I'm so glad that I went to that. And now I'm like, I'm really glad that I went to that.
I think it's right up there with like fear, something that really changes your life when you really understand and dig into it. Fears, conversations. I mean, just so many of, who, not how, things, books like that really make a huge difference. But the other thing I noticed on this too, my aha was you can't take the words at surface level. You have to really understand that it's kind of a multi-dimensional thing. And I think you could probably revisit this quite a few times and then start to observe it in the world and in people. But I also think there's going to be very few people that when you really peel it back, there'll be very few people in your life that knock it out of the park on all of them. But the ones that do will be priceless in your life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So if you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes, the first one is understanding, the second one is motive, and then like Linda said, today we're going to talk about ability. And basically ability is just, does the person have the ability to pull off what you need them to pull off when it comes to the relationship, to trust, to the job, whatever it is? Like, do they actually have the ability? And one thing he said was you need to know that like as early on as possible of if they have the ability, which is why one of the other ones we're going to talk about later, I think track record really comes into play, because to me, that's kind of how you see if they have the ability. But one of the things that I thought was a great story that he shared about ability was, do you remember him saying about, he has 2 daughters and they're his whole life and, they're his babies. And he said, people always say, what are you going to do when one of them wants to get engaged? Like when the guy wants to ask you for approval, are you going to like sit on the front porch with a shotgun? And he said, no, I'm going to have them to the house and I'm going to tell them to bring 2 things, their last 2 years tax returns and a copy of their credit report. And it was funny when he said it, but then he laughed and he said, but the reason is because I don't necessarily care what the numbers are that are on there, so much so as I need to know that they have the ability to be a husband, because being a boyfriend is different than being a husband, to my daughter. And I was like, okay, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. So true. And the thing I thought of is like, a lot of times I'll see 2 realtors decide to go together. And I think of here also, one of the things that they talked about is, and they talked about morale and different stuff like that through all of them. I think sometimes because we think somebody's an honest person with integrity or whatever, that covers lots of things, but it doesn't cover ability. And so those are very basic that you got to start with, because without those, you can't have any of these others. But also, it doesn't necessarily define ability. And I tell you, this is so convicting for me, because I look back at hires or different people I put in different spot, and I'm like, dang it. Yes, I didn't check for ability. I just assumed or hoped that they would be able to do the job that I put them in. I love the story that he talked about, the inheritance. Where he talked about, if God blesses you with money, the guy tells him, the God blessed me with money because he knew I'd be a good steward of it. So I'm not going to leave it to my kids who I know, if I know they're not going to be a good steward of it, I'm going to leave it to the ones that have proven they have the ability to do it. I thought that is so good, because I think sometimes we get so tangled up in fair or something like that, that we don't actually think that really wouldn't be fair to someone. You know what I mean?
Because they don't have the ability.
They don't have, well, it's the same thing. Our attorney told us, our attorney that does all of our estate taxes and all that stuff.
Yeah, like the
he
will.
said that he represented almost all of the lottery winners in Texas. For some reason, he got the right to do that. Every one of them lost everything they had because they didn't have the ability to learn about money or handle money. And so, and they'd end in divorce or killing themselves or whatever.
You know, which honestly, that's going to go right into the one we're going to do next. So our listeners will have to make sure that they listen to the next one, because I think a lot of that has to do with number 4, which is the character, like the makeup, your character. So we'll have to talk about that on the next one. But one of the things he said about ability too is if they're lacking the ability, it will never work. And it's like you're trying to, what's the saying? Like you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like if they're missing, if they don't have the ability, it's never gonna work. And I don't know, I was thinking, like, what do you think, or how are ways, and I'm trying to think through this too, but that you see if they have the ability or not. Like one thing I was gonna say, for example, okay, so today, and you've said this before, and I love, let me find it. I got to find it. Okay. Dan Martell, Adam coaches with him, and I got to tell you all about that retreat at another time, because you will be mind blown. But he said, he posted something today, and he said, hiring the wrong person will 5 times your workload. It's like using your hand in a canoe instead of a paddle. To fix this, use the test first hiring method. And it's 3 things. Number 1, a video submission. So you can see like how they interact. Yes. Number 2, a profile assessment. And number 3, a test project, which is what we talked about before. And I thought, okay, I saved that because I thought, okay, why do I get away from that every single time I hire somebody? Yeah. But like one surefire way I could think of to see somebody's ability is a test project. Like give them a project. And if they can do it, then that'll at least give you a little bit of like, do they have the ability or not?
Yeah, so true. It's called proof.
Yeah.
Ability. But I love that. I'm like you, I have multiple books going. So on the way to the fishing trip that I just got off of, I was reading that book, finishing it up. I'm almost finished, but it's another one of those where you could go back and reread over and over. We will put Trust in the show notes so that people can download the book Trust. I recommend it to everybody. It really makes you kind of look at different places in your life where you go, okay, I thought because this person was a moral, ethical person, that covered lots of things. But the truth is they had other issues. And he says they can be moral and ethical and wouldn't lie or cheat or steal, but they got other issues that are going to be the issues that keep them from having the ability to do the job. So I think you said, how do we do that? I think we have to slow down. And I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to defend some of these things to other people, like have someone else in your life. Because I think what happens is when we get in the process, we get blinded by it. And we don't, we almost now get so involved that we feel, I don't know if we feel bad asking them to give us proof, or we just go so fast we don't ask them to give proof or different things like that. But I think having somebody else that either makes you do that or makes you defend that how do you know they have the ability and will question that with you might be a good way to do it. I think slowing down, which is neither one of our traits to do. We're going to hire as fast as we can to get out of the pain. But I think looking for that ability is going to be a huge factor moving forward. And which I've done it a little bit. Like I think once I get somebody in a role and I look back, I think, okay, how did I miss this part? And I was telling Rhonda yesterday when I interviewed her for one of our future podcasts, I was telling her when I start to say they're a good person, I know I'm actually saying they're a good person, but they're not really quite up to doing the jobs that I need them to do. And I've asked myself even recently, how am I missing these key pieces that are super important, but I don't figure it out till later. I go off, they're a good person or they're a, I don't know. I think this is a big place.
I feel like so many entrepreneurs do that though. It's like especially when they are a good person, I mean, it's like sometimes I feel like in the past, like I've wanted it to work so bad with somebody because they are a good person. But when I look back on it, I truly don't think that they had the ability. Like I think I think of one person who I wanted to work so bad for so long, and really their financial thermostat was low. And I don't think that they had the ability, because I think they were satisfied making $50,000 a year. You know what I mean? And so it was like, because of where they were with their financial thermostat and their mindset around that, they didn't have the ability because they didn't want to, but they were a great person and I wanted it to work so bad. Yeah. So I don't know.
So what was the particular job with that person, without telling the details?
It was an agent. It was an agent on our team.
Okay. So it was an agent on their team. They didn't have the ability to do the amount you thought they would, or what?
Yeah, that we needed them to do. I mean, okay. We needed them to do, we needed them to want to sell more than 12 houses a year.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like they didn't have the ability, but there were a lot of reasons around that, and that they didn't really want to, I think, at the end of the day. But in the beginning, I knew from the beginning the ability probably wasn't there. Now that I look back on it, but I said exactly what you said, like, they're a great person and, everybody likes them, all of the things. And I think it's hard because it's like sometimes I'm really bad about like thinking that I can change people.
Yeah. Well, and I've said this before on a podcast. What I do on the front end is I start trying to figure out how to save them or make them be the person. I'm like, what are you doing? Get away from them for a little bit so that you can really see clearly.
Yeah.
Because again, I think when you're in the process, you don't see as clearly, but I don't know. I think it's really hard. I think I really wish I had taken every instance where I got into a situation and the person didn't have the ability to do what I needed them to do. I could figure out what could I've done differently to see that on the front end, not, 7 months in, 10 months in, year in, whatever. Because then you start settling, or you start patching for that person, bridging them with someone who can do it. All that stuff. So
he said one thing about executive teams, though. He said, like, one of the things you could do to track people's ability when you have a whole team, I wrote down, he said, does everyone know what everyone else does? Mm-hmm. Because when everybody knows what everybody does, you can see quicker if they have the ability to do it or not. And so I feel like we've done that kind of goes a little bit with like unique ability exercise and strategic coach stuff, some of that stuff we've done before, but figuring out like what they all do or what they're expected to do, and then what they actually are doing to see if they really have the ability. Because if you look at what the expected things are versus what they're actually doing every single day, they may not have the ability to do the expected things if they're not doing them, because otherwise they would have already have done it.
Yes. And then my problem is I'm already so busy and so whatever. I have a hard time seeing through. It feels like something's off and I can't really put my finger on it, especially if you have a team, because sometimes other team members will jump in and prop the other person up. You know what I mean? Rhonda said something really good yesterday on hers, because I talked to her about teamwork, because she's put together a really good team, and that episode will come out later. But I said, well, what are one of the ways that you do that? And she said, one of the things that she does is, because they are such a great team, now she tries to make sure that whoever she's putting on the team fits or does whatever. But she says, like, we kind of think about, like, if we were out in the wilderness, who would start the campfire, who would go get water. And she starts to kind of see who would do what, and would anybody be unwilling to carry their load or do whatever. So I just think I just think you cannot spend enough time on the front end. And I think having something like this to kind of think through would only help.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in the beginning, just to kind of wrap up, and then we can go to the next one, but too, I think, like, I was thinking through ability, and I just think a lot of it too comes back to like questions. I mean, I know we're going to talk about track record, but like questions on the front end of where have they done what you need them to do in the past? Or like, okay, if we think about this in a relationship though, when it comes to trust, like, do they have the ability to pull off what you need them to trust? And I'll never forget this. This is kind of semi-personal, but I was seeing a therapist one time, and in my previous marriage, and she said to me, I think what you need to ask yourself, Dana, is if something happened to you, I think I've shared this with you before, and you were like incapacitated for a certain amount of time, or not like, in a coma, but like couldn't work, or like couldn't take care of the house, like you were in a car wreck, or who knows, whatever, God forbid, something happened. Would you trust that person has the ability to like make things keep going as normal, or would like everything fall apart? And that really was like a huge eye opener to me. And so I think when you think about ability, it's not only like in the workspace, but just like even in your relationships, do they actually have the ability to do what you need them to do in the relationship so that the trust is there also?
That's a good analogy for that too. Yeah. I think there is, and I honestly, I go back to my biggest issues are clarity. When I don't have clarity on the front end, you'd have to have so much clarity about what the role took. And I think most of us at Hire, we don't always have that much clarity around it. And that's where we get off the rails. If you were so clear about what the job, and I think too, also, we talk about behavior and things like that. I think behavior, I have to know right up front if I'm putting the wrong behavior in. I got to now look for, can they have the ability to do a job that they're not behaviorally matched for? Right. You see what I'm saying? Because I think what happens is we get off the rails in different areas, and we're off in so many areas, we don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
Or we ignore one thing, like behaviorally, like for sales. Real estate people do this all the time. They hire a person, make them an assistant, and then all of a sudden they start letting them sell real estate. Well, they're either wired. I've done it too. They're either wired to sell or they're hired to support.
Yeah.
And yes, they can do both, but they're not going to be your leading salesperson if they're more wired to be your operations person.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But now they get to tasting the money of sales, and they don't really want to go back to the operations part. And then people get in a mess, and they do it all the time. But the truth is, you got to ask, do they have the ability to be my leading salesperson, or do they have the more ability to be my head operations person? Yeah. And I think when we do that, I think that's another area where we just say, oh yeah, that's fine. You can sell too, well, not really. I mean, anybody that's going to do really well at something is going to really narrow in and just do that one thing.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. There's a lot on ability. There's a lot.
There is a lot. And, they're also intermingled. I think sometimes that once you kind of start realizing that each of these characteristics or these components that have to be there for trust, they kind of intermingle with each other. They kind of overlap with each other. So we'll wrap up for this one, and then we'll see you over on the other side when we talk about character. But if you have not, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And the greatest compliment you give us is a 5-star review, and pass this podcast along to anyone that you think that would benefit from the conversations. So Dana, I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. See you then.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.